Hello, my name is Gil Perez, and today I'm going to be talking about trusts and how we use trusts. What are they? How we use them in the estate planning and different types of trusts. So let's tackle the first question. What is a trust? A trust at a high level is an asset vehicle. An asset vehicle that's formed by what we call the grantor. That is the person who establishes the trust. And how you would do this is when you title something like a piece of property, you would title it in the name of the trust rather than the individual owner. Now, the parties that are involved in a trust, there's three types of parties involved. You have the grantor, which is the person responsible for creating and funding the trust. You have the trustee, who typically is the individual responsible for managing the trust and executing actions such as dispersing the funds in the trust. You then have the beneficiaries, which are the individuals who benefit from the trust. You have two types of beneficiaries. Typically, that's the income beneficiary, which is somebody who would receive income from the trust. Let's say the trust generated income. If you were to give this income on a yearly basis to the individual, they would be known as the income beneficiary. The remainder beneficiary is the one who gets the assets at the end. The remainder. So, for example, if you were to liquidate that property, the beneficiary who received that would be the remainder beneficiary. So, why do we use trusts? Trusts are typically used for a couple different reasons. One of the biggest reasons is the management of the assets. This is the most common use of a trust. Basically, what it is you're preventing mismanagement of assets. It's typically used for individuals who are not equipped to manage the funding themselves. One thing could be for potentially a disabled child, right? If you're to pass away, establishing a trust to be able to take care of the child, while the child would not be able to act on these funds themselves, a trustee could manage these funds to make sure that they're taken care of. Another example would be a minor, right? So you would have a minor that you wanted to leave assets to, but you didn't want them to squander the money. So you could set up a trust that allowed things like taking money out for college or a car, things of that nature. Trust can also be used as a way to protect from creditors, right? So, using a spendthrift clause, you could actually prevent creditors from being able to access the funds inside of a trust. Split interests are also a reason why we would use trusts. A split interest is, for example, multiple interests in one piece of property or in an asset. An example of this could be a rental property, so like a home that you're leaving behind to two children. But let's say you didn't want to split up the home into two separate interests. You could put the name into the trust, and then you could have split interest inside of that trust. For example, the income generated out of that. Businesses as well could be used as a split interest in a trust. Trust can also be used to avoid probate. That's another big pro of using a trust. Trusts allow the ability to bypass probate, which is definitely beneficial to estate planning. Keeping assets out of probate is one. It will help with the costs of probate, right? So probate can be expensive. That does eliminate that cost, and it also helps you ensure that your assets are being utilized in the way that you see fit or the way that you wish. Right? Typically, sometimes when you go to the probate, you may run into issues where the courts decide against your will at that point. Another reason to use trusts would be minimizing taxes. From an overall standpoint, you can actually reduce the gross estate of the grantor utilizing trusts in a specific way. Now I'm going to go over different types of trusts at high level. The different types, you have revocable, irrevocable, inter vivos. A revocable trust is as the name suggests, when the grantor sets up the trust, they actually reserve the right to revoke the trust at any time. This could be for several different reasons. Let's say, for example, misbehavior or something of that nature. The grantor could take away the funds in the trust. An irrevocable trust actually is the opposite of that. When the grantor sets up the trust, they cannot actually revoke the property that's inside the trust. And then irrevocable trust typically has gift and estate tax benefits as well. Inter vivos trust is a trust that's created during the lifetime of the grantor. So typically, as a grantor of the trust, I create the trust. It's something that I want to use to leave assets behind or to move assets into. And sometimes this include the inter vivos includes all revocable trusts. Just from the nature of it, doesn't make sense to be able to revoke something after you're dead and gone. You can't revoke something if you actually don't have the power to do so. And then some irrevocable trusts can actually be inter vivos as well. Additional types of trusts: testamentary trust. It's a trust that's created after the death of a grantor. So, for example, you were to pass on and you wanted to leave the assets behind in a trust. You didn't establish the trust while you were alive. You would establish it in a testamentary method by doing it after your death. Standby trust is a trust that it's created during the lifetime of the grantor, but its characteristic is that it has limited or no funding behind it for different reasons. It could be funded, planned to fund at a later time, things like that. A pour over trust. Pour over trust is a trust that receives funding from another source. So you may have another trust that moves funds into this trust, or it may just actually come from somewhere else. A grantor trust can be an irrevocable or revocable trust, but what is special in this case is that the grantor is actually responsible for the income tax inside of the trust. It's really kind of the income for the grantor. That's why they take the responsibility and the burden of that. Now, a trust can be funded or unfunded. As the name suggests, unfunded trusts can be defined but yet not yet funded. It's very similar to what we just discussed, where the plan to fund it could come later, right? So there may be a life insurance could be funding this trust in the future, things like that. A funded trust does contain property from a grantor, so at the time of putting together the trust, the grantor funds the trust, making a funded trust. Now, funds can also take the attributes of simple or complex. A simple trust is typically when the income is annually distributed from the trust, and complex trust would have a variable distribution that's not typically annually. Now we'll go over different types of trusts used in the estate planning process. Right, different types of trusts. Why are they related to estate planning, or why are they beneficial to estate planning? An inter vivos revocable trust. It's one of the most common types of trust. It actually allows us to avoid probate with the assets, which is can save us money in the long run. Because, as I mentioned earlier, probate can be expensive. It also does provide a level of privacy, but however, it is not an effective way to reduce estate taxes. Now, moving on, we also have an inter vivo irrevocable trust. This type of trust does allow for reducing gift tax liability using Crombie power. A life insurance trust. A life insurance trust, also known as an irrevocable life insurance trust or an ILIT, it allows the insurance policy to not be included in the gross estate of the insured. So, as the grantor, if you were to set up this life insurance trust, this would not this policy would not be included in your gross estate. Now, an inter vivos bypass trust can be used to shield funds from gift tax. The next type of trust is power of appointment. So, a power of an appointment trust is a trust in which we actually grant power to the beneficiary, which is it kind of goes against the typical idea of a trust, right? Is that there's a trustee and a beneficiary, and the trustee were to distribute the funds to the beneficiaries. In this type of trust, a beneficiary can have limited or general power of appointment to take benefits within the trust. This is the type of trust used to take advantage of a marital deduction. One of the last ones that I'll talk about is the qualified terminable interest property, or the QTIP. It's a trust granting lifetime benefits to a spouse. And then what happens is after the spouse were to pass away, the assets then transfer to individuals that the original grantor specifies. So, for example, let's say you were married and had children. The children were not the biological children of your spouse. The trust could be left to the spouse, and then after the spouse were to pass on, the assets would then transfer to your children. That would be a typical way to use a QTIP type trust. Now, there are definitely several more trust types available in the estate planning, but those are some of the common ones that I wanted to go over. So, in conclusion, trusts are a very effective way to manage our assets. Right, they're the vessel of assets. So, think of it as kind of like a boat, and then we'll put assets or property inside the boat. The boat's not necessarily owned by us; the boat's owned by itself. Therefore, we have somebody that the captain or the trustee would elect to distribute those funds. Right. So, and a trust can also help us manage and protect the assets while allowing beneficiaries to receive the benefits of the trust. They can also provide an effective estate planning vehicle, as we've talked about. And there are also, in conclusion, there's various forms of trust for numerous financial situations. So not one trust fits all. Definitely unique to your situation. There's a trust out there that can fit what you're trying to accomplish. And that is all I have to present today on trust. Thank you for your time, and we will talk soon.